That concludes tonight's citizens' comments. We'll now move to agenda item number 8. First up tonight, as we conduct business, our Deputy Superintendent, Mr. Franchini. And you have two items tonight. The first one is an item for action. That's the second reading of policies as well as administrative rules. IJNDAA, entitled Distance, Online, and Virtual Education, as well as JCDAAA, as well as JCDAAA Administrative Rules, School Wellness. Mr. Franchini, the microphone is yours, sir. Item for action.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Thompson, members of the board. I'm going to ask Dr. Glenda Levine, our Associate Superintendent for Human Resources, to come up and present those policies, and after that she'll also present an item for information, the Human Resources update.
Thank you, Mr. Franchini. Dr. Levine, good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. Dr. Murray, other members of the board, Dr. Thompson, we recently submitted 2 policies for review, and we've submitted them to the review committee first for the school board. And we made some few adjustments to the distance, online, and virtual education policy. And then the other policy for school wellness remained as it was at the last board meeting. At this time, it is the recommendation of the administration to approve the second and final reading for policies as listed under item 8 of the August 26, 2014 board agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Levine. Do I have a motion and a second to accept the recommendation of the administration?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the recommendation of the administration to approve the second and final reading for the policies listed under tonight's agenda item 8.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper has made a motion. That motion has been seconded by Ms. Lee to accept the recommendation of the administration to approve the second and final reading for policies as listed under agenda item 8 of the August 26, 2014 board agenda. Do we have any discussion regarding this motion? Hearing no discussion, we'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion to accept the administration's recommendation, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The motion carries unanimously. Dr. Levine, the policies in agenda item 8 have been approved. Second reading. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Now you have items for information. We'll start with agenda item 8A, Human Resources Update. And then we'll change gears to 8B, 2014 ACT results. Thank you, Dr. Levine.
Everyone, good evening again. We always like to give you an update from the Human Resources Department as to where we stand with our new hires. The last time I stood before you, we had only hired about 40 individuals for that time as far as certified staff members were concerned. If you look at the chart that we have before you this evening, you see that we have hired 319 new employees in Berkeley County. And remember, these are only our certified or professional staff members. And I know some of the numbers might look a little bit different to you. For example, if you look at principal, you see 1 there, but that's because we hired only 1 individual from out of district as far as our principals are concerned this year. The other individuals were already in the district working in some other capacity, typically as an assistant principal in most cases, but this chart reflects the new hires. So I just wanted to reiterate that so that you know where they're coming from. And also, if you would look at ethnicity there for our new hires, you see that we have a total of 41 African American and other combined, which takes us to roughly about 13%, and we've always stated that we're working on diversity and increasing diversity in the district. So we want you to know that that is still definitely a major priority. We see the numbers that it's about the same as it was in the past, so we haven't lost ground, but we haven't gained the ground that we want to gain, and I want you to know that we are definitely working on that. And I also have to add while I'm here is that this is just not the result of one individual. My work is the work of the entire Human Resources Department. And you'd be surprised at the number of phone calls and the number of hours that are put in, the number of cars that are here on the weekend, because we consider it and we take it very seriously. We want our children to have the best teachers in front of them, the best certified staff member, and we are totally committed to doing that. So we want you to know that as well. We also have another update for you, and actually this is something that changed, I am pretty sure. We actually submitted this information on Friday for posting, and we were showing a total of 7 vacancies. And at this time, I can tell you right now that most of them do not exist anymore. We are also studying the number of students that we have in some of our schools and looking at the need for additional allocations. So I don't want you to think that these numbers were out there forever and we were just unable to hire people for them. We've had some changes over the past couple of weeks, and we're working to make sure that we have every single vacancy filled for our students. And they're not cases where students aren't being taught right now. We work to get substitutes in the classrooms who have certification, and also in some cases, in order to offload classes that may be a little bit larger right now, those students might be in a class that is somewhat larger until we can take the sizes down by some of the hires that we plan to do. So I just wanted you to be aware that we're working. Your Human Resources Department is a hard-working department. And please, if you see the individuals in the department, please make sure that you thank them for what they do just as I do on a daily basis, because they're definitely appreciated. And I just want you to know we're working hard because we're not satisfied until that's zeroed out completely.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Dr. Levine, for the Human Resources update. Do we have any questions or comments for Dr. Levine regarding her report?
I have a question.
Ms. Moore?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, my question is, where is the dilemma? Where is the dilemma for the black teachers? What we need to do?
Well,
I mean, what needs to be done? That we could get more black teachers in the district.
In order to increase numbers, I can tell you one of the things that we are doing right now, Dr. Thompson has been gracious enough to allow us to expand our recruitment efforts. So one of the major things that we do is recruit at historically black colleges and universities, and we've expanded our search actually in terms of working and looking to gain more teachers and more diversity in terms of the Human Resources Department for our certified staff members. On top of that, I would ask all of you what I always ask of you. We know that the HR department in and of itself is not the only recruitment initiative or department for the county. We rely so much on you all, and I can tell you right now, some of you have actually shed some light on some individuals who we can look at and bring them in, talk to them, and hopefully eventually hire. What we run into a lot of times just with anybody, the certification issues. We know that our numbers are not what they used to be. When I graduated from Benedict College in 1992, we were told at that time that we knew the number of African American teachers was decreasing, and we're finding that to be the case. It is a challenge, but I can tell you that in terms of our studies and our numbers, we are roughly about 15% in terms of our numbers for African American teachers totally across the district. Other districts are about the same in this area in terms of where we are, and some slightly lower, about 11%. So it's something that all of us need to work on. It's not just a Berkeley County challenge. We've learned that it's a challenge for the entire area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions or comments for Dr. Levine regarding her Human Resources update? Sounds like you're doing a great job. Thank you, Dr. Levine. So we'll move now to agenda item 8B, 2014 ACT results. Mr. Franchini.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll ask Dr. O'Gorman, our Associate Superintendent for Instruction and Accountability, to come up and give the results of our ACT.
Good evening, Dr. O'Gorman.
Good evening, sir. Members of the board, Dr. Thompson, ladies and gentlemen. We'll go through the ACT results for 2014. Real quick, I want to go over the difference between the ACT and the SAT. It's a question that we hear a lot. In South Carolina, these are South Carolina statistics here at the top, about 57% take the ACT and 70% take the SAT. Those numbers vary greatly from district to district, but that is a South Carolina average. You'll see in just a second it's a little bit different for Berkeley. The ACT is an achievement test, where the SAT is an aptitude test. So the ACT actually measured is what is learned in school, where the SAT tests reasoning and verbal abilities. These next slides are kind of zooming in on the components. So the ACT has English, math, reading, and science. Scores range from 0 to 36. The SAT has critical reading, math, and writing, and scores ranging from 200 to 800, so quite a different scale, obviously, between those two assessments. Here are the trend data for the number of test takers in the ACT versus SAT. So you see that the majority of our students actually take the ACT over the SAT. So we got some information from the State Department after the press release, or with the press release, that said, according to ACT officials, a 0.3 increase is a statistically significant improvement. So I want you to pay attention to that 0.3 increase as we go through the next few slides. So you've got our composite score highlighted here of 0.6, so that's doubly significant, I guess, with the 0.6 increase above the 0.3. Here is our English results from, we go all the way back to 2010. I've got the district in green there, the state in blue, and the nation or national average there in red. You can see the bottom score is us, and the top score is the national average. So you see just 1 point difference there, and an increase from 18.8 to 19.4, obviously significant there in English. Also in reading, you see the gap that was here in 2010 and how we've closed that in 2014. Also, again, the increase from 19.9 to 20.7 for the district, just under the state and national average there. Math, although it looks like a flat line, this is statistically significant. That's a 0.5 increase there. And we had gained some ground there on the state and the nation. Science also looks good. This is a difference of just 0.7, also an increase from 19.6 to 20.1. And then our composite score, which is sort of lumping it all together. Again, you see the range here in 2010 and how we've closed that gap here in 2014 with a difference of just 0.9 between us and the national average, and that's an increase of about 0.6 there, as we showed earlier. So overall, we're pleased with these results. I want to talk a little bit about that point scale and what that means in South Carolina. So what's the difference between a 20 and a 21, or a 21 and a 22? So I've pulled all the major colleges in South Carolina, and so what this column shows is 25% of the students that were accepted at these schools made this score on the SAT or lower. So we've got the Citadel here at 21, Clemson at 25. I've got to give kudos to Clemson. It's going to be painful. I think they were the high flyers in the state here. So 25, that's Coastal Carolina at 18. Let's see what Furman is there at 25 as well. And then over here we've got 75% of the students scored this score or lower. And so you see Clemson there at 25 and 30. They've got the highest score overall there. But what that shows you is that, the difference between our composite score and the national composite score isn't really significant when you look at the entry-level scores or, the range there. So we are competitive on a national scale, if you will, according to these results. Now, as I said, we showed a variety of, or a range of the number of students that take the ACT or the SAT. Students choose what they want to take, or did in 13-14. In addition to that, Our career and technology students take work keys, and some of our students with special needs. That is going to change for the current school year. All 11th grade students this year will take work keys. I'm going to talk about what that assessment is in just a minute. And as defined by legislation, a college and career ready assessment. And we think that will be the SAT or the ACT. If I were to flip a coin or roll the dice or take a stab at it, I would bet the ACT. And work keys is a product of the ACT, and it looks like that is a trend at the state right now. No guarantees, though. All right, so work keys, this is straight off of the ACT website describing what work keys is. It is a job skills assessment. It helps employers select, hire, train, develop, and retain high-performance workforce. It measures foundational and soft skills, something we hear our partners out there in the business field ask us to help them with in getting students ready for the workforce. It offers a credential at the end of that assessment where students can sort of show off what they know and what they're prepared to do out in the field. So this is a breakdown of work keys results by occupation. So we've just listed a few here: receptionist, machine operator, accountant, and mechanical engineer. And over here you see applied math, reading, and learning information, and you see the highlighted red numbers. So you would need a 3, a 4, and a 4 on work keys in order, to be accepted here. And you see how it kind of increases as you go up in salary range, and of course the degrees that might go along with those specific occupations. So that kind of breaks down the work keys results for you. So if you have any questions at this time, I'll be glad to try and answer.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. O'Gorman. Ms. Moore, you may go ahead and ask your question.
Your listing of colleges for those reports, do
Yes,
you
ma'am.
have a score for South Carolina State College in Orangeburg?
South Carolina State is right here.
So, I didn't hear you mention that.
I'm sorry. I was just looking at,
I mean, that's fine, I understand.
yeah, I just
but
picked out a few random. I was actually looking at these scores for.
So what
initial starting
is
point.
what school is
South Carolina State is 15 and 18, is that right?
I'll bet you he mentions it next time, Ms. Moore.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
appreciate that. I really do appreciate that.
I was squinting to look at Wofford, and Brantley's head got in the way. He went to Wofford, so I've got to pick on him a little bit.
Almost got to Clemson then.
Yeah, almost got to Clemson. Yeah.
I asked that because I hope it's, when you don't do that, it make me think that when you hire, that it reflects your hiring practices. That if you're a graduate of those schools, you don't get hired. It make me think that way, but I'm happy you have them listed there.
Yes,
you
ma'am.
have state listed. I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. And duly noted, Dr. O'Gorman. Mr. Cooper.
This might be a little bit off the wall, but in looking at the charts and the graphs, and I can understand, statistically, we're talking about what's significant. You've got, a national, that's statistically a very large pool and will norm itself out. Same kind of with the state. We've got a lot more variability because we've got, I would say, a smaller sample size. But
Right.
and look at the different charts across the years. And again, this may be a totally irrelevant question, but how do we ever norm back to cohort? Because I know sometimes when we've looked at MAP scores and stuff, there's certain groups of kids that are going through the system that are nailing tests. Or just like a cohort of children, and that's maybe more finely delineated at a school level even. Mm-hmm. But does that come into this at all? I mean, how do we really know how much progress we made with that whole group of kids, and can we expect that type of improvement next year based on where the kids are this year or were this year?
Right, and you're talking about the sample of students, and I just want to go back to this first graph to address that question.
Right.
If it's still in here. So we've got 890 students. I don't know why I keep doing
But your
that.
sample size has been flat for a couple of years.
Fairly flat for a couple of years, but going back to your question, it would be difficult to pull out the kids that took just the SAT and go back to, say, their MAP scores and predict. You could do it. I don't know that.
Not relevant, though.
Well,
That's a long time frame.
Let me say it this way. When all students take the ACT, and we know that what we are teaching directly impacts the test that they're going to take, it will be a lot easier to provide predictability data for that. Does that make sense? You know, so when we've got this range of tests being, you got me.
Yeah, that's the HSAP replacement.
Yep.
When they choose it.
Right.
Thank you.
Does that conclude your comments, Mr. Cooper? All right, do we have any other questions or comments for Dr. O'Gorman?
Right, and I would just like to suggest that, you know, what has the most impact on these test scores is a rigorous curriculum for our students. And we can look at trend data for the number of students that are enrolled in honors and AP classes as well, and that's increased significantly over the last couple of years.
Right.
Versus dual credit.
Right.
All right. Any more other questions or comments? Thank
I
you
have
very
a
much.
comment.
Ms. Moore has a comment.
And my comment is that I'm always asking about overcrowded classes because the AP classes and the honor classes usually is not overcrowded. However, the regular classes are overcrowded, and then at times, and then you have students in there with special needs or, yes, that need special help. But if you have 20-something children in a class, then, and one teacher, the teacher can't teach because they can't hardly keep order. And therefore the children can't learn. And that's an issue. I heard that we got some more funds for education. And Dr. Thompson, I want to find out, or you could answer me, do we have some funds now to lower class size?
No, ma'am, our class size is the same ratio that we used last year, and if you look at the new educational funding formula, based on our growth, we actually went backwards this past year with regards to our funding. Now, there were some districts that benefited from the new funding formula, but we were pretty much square, they weighted students differently, but they took that money from other line items to get there. So at the end of the day, our funding was pretty similar to the way it was in previous years.
Okay, thank you.
Is that the poverty weighting, 0.25?
That and, yes, and all those other things that we transfer to the PFA.
So to get the 0.25 poverty weighting, they backpack some of our funds from other areas?
Talented and all those other categories.
Gotcha.
Back the other categories.
All right. All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Sounds like we are ready to move to agenda item number 9. Tonight we have our superintendent's report. Among some of the topics to be discussed tonight will be an update on the Tanner Foster Creek area school construction update. And that, again, for those of you who are not familiar with that area, is located in Hanahan. Dr. Thompson, the microphone is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I may, before I step down to the podium for the Tanner Foster Creek update, I'd like to give an enrollment update, if I may switch those two in order. Sure. And I'd just like to thank all of our teachers and administrators, staff, students, and parents for making an awesome start to the 2014-2015 school year. We had a great start. We had a few hiccups. We did have a bus that caught on fire. We had a few that broke down. We had a few that wouldn't start. But for the most part, our transportation system that we administered did a great job getting our students to school on time. And so I'm very appreciative of all our staff for their efforts and contributions to making this school year an excellent start. Just a few numbers in regards to our enrollment. Our K-5, that's our 5-year-old kindergartens through 12th grade. Today, day 6, we had 31,628 students. This same day last year, we had 30,905. If I did my math right, that's 723 more students than this day last year. Our K-4, our kindergarten, our 4-year-old programs, our CDEP programs through 12th grade, that equals 649. Last year, we had 31,836. That's about 813 more than this day last year. And fortunately, I would like to thank our legislature. We were able to add about 90 more students to our CDEP program, our 4-year-old program. And that's great news. We had some sites that had lots of students on waiting list, and we would like to add more, but of course space is an issue. Additionally, we do have 617 3- and 4-year-old programs enrolled in the Berkeley County Head Start program as well. So lots of students in Berkeley County schools. So I'm going to step down to the podium for the presentation so I can point out a few things. Mr. Chair, members of the board, staff, and members in the audience, I'd like tonight to talk about Tanner Foster Creek school site selection and where we are in the process. Last Thursday, well, let's back up a little bit further than that. We had some folks from City Council come and speak, and lots of citizen comments over the last couple of months to discuss this school site selection. And I'm happy to say that we did meet with some citizens in the city of Hanahan, a couple of board members. I'd like to thank Ms. Lee, Mr. Etheridge, and Dr. Murray for joining me to meet with some representatives from the community and the city.
And Mr. Obie as well.
Mr. Obie, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to omit you there. That came in and discussed. I think we had a productive meeting, and what I shared with the folks there in the room is we're going to open this process back up and start from scratch. And we've posted a request for a proposal. We refer to that as an RFP. It was posted on Friday at approximately 12 o'clock. And we encourage everyone in that room to spread that RFP and talk to all landowners or multiple landowners, and if they would like to try to couple some properties and put together. And we have an aggressive schedule to try to get those bids back in or those proposals back in and try to find a suitable site for this school and get this project moving. A couple of things that are part of the RFP, and I'm sorry, I apologize for the small print, but there were about 20 items. I did not want to omit any of those items for the that one item might be important to you and one item might be important to someone else. But we're looking for 10 to 30 Highland acres. I should have put that in there. But the proposed site may consist of multiple parcels. The parcel must accommodate a building of about 100,000 square feet. That's comparable to Cane Bay Middle, Nexton Elementary. The square footage of those schools that are built to about 900 student capacity. We'll need to meet SCDOT guidelines. Stacking is an important element. When students drop off parents, we need to get those cars off the main road, not to inhibit traffic as little as possible. We'd like to have parking spaces for 150 cars on a normal day, and with the capacity for an overflow parking and special events of about 300 cars. We need to have a heavy-duty drive for ability to accommodate 15 school buses. And I hope we get all 15 there on time and none of them break down or catch on fire. And we'd like to have the safest possible route for our students that are walking and riding bikes. We need water, sewer, and gas, storm retention, and we're going to ask that zoning be the responsibility of the seller in this case. So we need property that's zoned appropriately, and our contract would be, and a closing would be contingent of the proper zoning. Of course, a couple other items that are part of the request for proposal. We want to stay away from flood zones. We don't want to be in flight zones of the airport, the runway. We've run into that issue before. No heavy industry due to air quality and traffic concerns. Of course, we need to have the infrastructure for road parking, linkage between building, bus loop, parent loop, and playgrounds. And no history of dumping landfills on the proposed site. So this RFP is posted on our website. It's been advertised in all the local newspapers, Post and Courier. The Hanahan paper, I think, now is online, but the Berkeley Independent, the Goose Creek Gazette. So those items are there, and so we're asking you to help get that word out in regards to the RFP. So now that we've talked about the next steps, I would like to take a few minutes to review with the board how we've gotten to this process to where we're starting over. The referendum was passed by the voters in November of 2012. The board met in early January to prioritize the projects. And these are the 4 projects that were brought to the front in January. You can see that the Hanahan project was listed second with a date to open in August of 2015. The only reason that Nexton was ahead of the Tanner Plantation, but that property had already been donated to the school district or was under contract. So you have a little additional time here to acquire the property, and we estimated that time for about 9 months. Okay, then you had the Goose Creek and Stratford were also high priorities moving forward. Then the board came back in July with the other 5 major projects. Of course, this is the high school in the Clements Ferry Road area, the middle school in the Clements Ferry Road area, Cross High School renovations, the Marrington Middle School renovations, and Fox Bank. So 7 of the 9 projects are underway. The Hanahan project is not underway. The Fox Bank, we've acquired the property, but it's not set to open until August of 2018, so we're not ready to start construction there. But of the major projects, we have the vast majority of them on time and on schedule and underway. So we need to get this Hanahan project going. Those schools are the most crowded in the district. With the August of 2015 school opening, we were very aggressive, and we were able to obtain an architect on February the 2nd, 2013, and a contractor was selected March 26, 2013. And some of the initial properties that we were looking at, we did, as our speaker tonight alluded to, this is the Williams Lane property, and I'm going to refer to that as Williams Lane Option 1 because there are 2 Williams Lane properties. And since we do have a request for a proposal out tonight, I'm going to keep my comments as neutral as possible and just focus on the facts that I know to be true up to this point. We did have conversations with the city. I'm not aware of any conversations in 2008. Of course, I was not superintendent then, but I believe in the fall of 2012, met with some city officials about the possibility of this property. Looked like a nice piece of property at the time, but no due diligence was done on that property because we didn't have any money for the project at that time. Just to get you acclimated with the area, this is Williams Lane right there. This is Foster Creek Road. This is the Bilo at Tanner Plantation. And this is Hanahan High School to get you acclimated, and this is the Goose Creek Reservoir. Other pieces of property that we talked about, these 2 sites are owned by Charleston Water System, a CWS property. There's about 84 acres there, and we actually had a contract at one point for one of these 2 parcels. And this piece of property with the blue dot is the Wren development, or I'll refer to as the Bowen property. So we had those 3 properties for consideration. So we kind of went through a process of elimination. We did think that the Williams Lane property, we went into the process thinking that was where the school was going to be located. We found some challenges there when we did some due diligence, and so we went to the next site, the Charleston Water System, which looked like lots of acreage, and due diligence there showed some issues. And then the Bowen property didn't have some of the wetland issues that the other properties had, and we'll talk about that a little more in just a moment. So let me do this. Let me talk about Williams Lane, Option 1. This is the property, here. This is Williams Lane. This is north. Am I going too fast? This is North Rhett. Get you acclimated. Williams Lane runs into Foster Creek Road right here, if you're familiar with the area. So this is, I believe, it's 21-acre parcel, which from this view looks good. 21 acres. There is right there the frontage road requirements just is shy of what DOT requires there for frontage access, but there's 21 acres in this piece here. Now, upon further review, when we did some survey of the property, this is the same 21 acres. If you see in the yellow there on the bottom of the property, that was a wetland buffer that occupies 10 acres. So the 21 acres now became 11, and it's of a narrow rectangular shape, and it even cut a little bit more of the frontage road there on Williams Lane. So if we go back, there are some properties that are adjacent to this property. And I believe there's 6 parcels, and we sent letters to the residents in this area about the interest of selling their property to the school district. And I have a copy of one of the letters that we sent out in 2012, right after the time of the referendum, as we were looking to try to meet to get this project going. So I would like to bring up George Bullwinkle of Next and Pruitt just to give some insight about wetland permits and to fill wetlands and the buffers, and acquiring heirs property as well.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Mr. Chairman, Dr. Thompson asked me to talk to you on 2 specific issues tonight. The first would be the wetlands concerns that were just outlined. And you're going to see it's both later on, both the Williams Lane option 1 and option 2 are encumbered by significant wetlands. Those are not just wetlands, but also a permit was applied for and was also granted by the Army Corps. Just like any other wetland permit that is acquired, what you then have to do is go and put covenants and restrictions on the property, i.e. the expansive buffers around it. Normally those run from anywhere between 25 and 50 feet at any point. So the question is, what does it take to then go and remove those covenants and restrictions and allow you to fill that property? Basically what that is a permit modification. It's very similar to what we're going through right now at Kane Hoy. In that instance, it's just a straight permit to go ahead and build the schools and the roads serving it. But in this case, it's actually called a modification, but takes about the exact same amount of time, which is between, in our professional opinion, 9 to 12 months at a minimum. Now, when you have to go in for a permit modification, that's triggered by any new crossings you want to do, i.e. if you want to put a new road in, which you'll specifically see on option 2 of the Williams Lane. If you want to fill any of the property to then be used for the actual school site, or 3, if you want to change the buffers in any at all. The next step when you go in and apply to the Army Corps for this change is they're going to look at whatever impacts that you're going to place on the property and obviously the covenants and wetlands, and they're going to make you mitigate it. And it's either going to be through a mitigation credit. You're going to go out to a mitigation bank, which there's a few of them still available right now, and you're going to buy credits from a mitigation bank to offset that, which can be pretty expensive depending on your impacts. Or secondarily, you're going to have to mitigate it through other properties, and that is also a core discretion, and it's a lengthy process. Now, the second step that we talk about is heirs property. And I'll give Mr. Franchini this, and there's a few extra. But I thought it's important to give you that information, and you can make it available to the public, because it actually comes from the Center of Heirs Property Preservation, which is a very, very highly esteemed group located in Charleston. Basically, when you go to acquire heirs property, there's 2 procedures. 1, you go to probate court, or 2, you go to the magistrate's court and try to get quiet title. Heirs property is classified as anything over 10 years. So in other words, the owner of the property has been deceased for 10 years. The property was passed down by South Carolina law intestate, which means there was no will. So it passes to all the heirs. Now, if that's only happened one time, that's pretty easy. You can go, you can look at the deeds, you can figure out the family tree. But many properties in South Carolina, this has taken place multiple times, if not 20 to 30 times. So what you have to do in such a circumstance is you have to go out and do an enormous amount of research. And what you're trying to do is build that family tree from today the whole way back to the time of the owner of the property. And as you imagine, it starts to branch out. It's a genealogy project, basically. That normally takes anywhere, depending on how long ago the owner of the property deceased, anywhere from 4 to 6 months. At that time, you're in Charleston County right now to get a quiet title action and a ruling and an order, which then would vest title. You're talking approximately 12 months to do so. So that process in total, and it can be longer or shorter, again, depending on how large the tree is. You're talking, in our estimation, anywhere from 16 to 20 months to move through. And actually, the Bowen tract, the owner of that acquired most of that property through heirs property. The second option, and actually one that normally coincides with the first option, is what you'll end up finding when you do your research, is that one of the heirs has died within the 10 years. So then what that means is there's an additional step that you go to probate court. You go through the probate process. The probate judge then vests the title as it relates to that single heir into his heirs underneath him. Then you bring those heirs into your next suit, which is, your next complaint, which is going back again to the magistrate's court to get a quiet title action. All this said, and as you can read there, so it's just not my opinion, it's long, it's tedious, and it's difficult, but it can definitely be done. One of the major things you want to do with heirs property is immediately locate who, I hate to say this, but who has the majority interest. And what you then do is try to get, whether it's you cobble together 30, 40, 50%, and at that time is when you initiate and go to the court. That way you have a binding contract. If not, you're wasting your time, because obviously every heir should get to be able to make their own decision to move forward or not. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them on either topic.
All right, do we have any questions for Mr. Bullwinkle at this time? Mr. Bullwinkle, just to make sure I understand, if we are trying to procure heirs property, we're looking at 16 to 20 months before we can begin construction. There's no construction, or can you begin while that process is? You couldn't.
You could not begin construction because you won't actually own the property. Similarly, if you ask me the same question about the modifications to the wetlands or the wetland buffers, our opinion would be no, you would not start construction, because you probably have some issues, and Brantley could talk about it better, with your bond indenture documents and other things, because you don't know the final outcome. So in either instance, that is when you're going to start construction. And quite frankly, in either event, you probably aren't going to get too far down the design, because again, you don't know if it's going to take place, not, or what shape the property is going to end up in, especially on the 404 permit.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And just, it was not that we were opposed to the Williams Lane property. We were trying to meet the start date of the August 2015 opening, and we're concerned about the time constraints that this property would pose on the construction process. So then we started looking at other properties. The next property was the Charleston Water System, and this is 84 acres. Looks great from this map. However, it's divided into 2 parcels, and there's a line about right through here. And through this area is a zone called the APZ. I believe I have that term right, and I'll explain that the best way I can. It's in the direct path of the Charleston International Airport runway, and within a certain radius of the airport. And we could not construct the school in that zone. So we were down in this corner to about 25 acres. That right there was an easement that CWS wanted. They have some transmission lines and main water lines that run through there. So, but we still felt like we had enough potential property. We started doing some due diligence, and we realized that we only had about 6 acres of usable land, and it was scattered all over the place for the wetlands. We had some neighbors that talked about one of our community meetings that this property is wet. We did the survey, and they were correct. It's wet. So also, there to get in, there would have been a one-way in and a one-way out. But it is a large piece of property. It just doesn't seem to work for a school site. So next, we came across the Bowen property in the summer of 2013, and the Bowen property is right in this area here. We've negotiated between 10 and 12 acres for a school. One of the things about the Bowen site, where's my pointer? There was an access road right there, and I can't remember the name of that road, but the Bowen Pier Drive, I believe, is the name of that road. And this is Foster Creek Road, and there was plans to extend that road into the property for the second access. Those are a couple things that we knew about the Bowen property. It was only 10 to 12 acres, but it was all highland. It was pretty much a nice square piece of property, or a square piece of property. Potentially 2 access roads. The wetlands had been delineated. OSF, Office of School Facilities, and DOT had approved the location. Utilities were there. There were no environmental or endangered species that would have impacted the project, and the traffic study had been completed. We had some architectural drawings of the school. That's the Bowen Pier Drive. That's the Foster Creek Road. This is the car loop for the stacking, the design, and I think you've seen this before. That is the bus loop and some playground area in there. There were some wetlands as boundary to the property, but none within the configuration of the school itself. But that property was under contract and went to the city for rezoning, and the zoning was not favorable. As we go forward, and I've shared this with folks, most of the property that we have to take forward is going to need to be rezoned. And we just would like for the property to be rezoned on the merits of that property and not items to come into discussion that not related to the zoning of a specific property. Those items should not include extending a TIF, or a TIF has been tax increment financing, or it's used to subsidize community development. And there's one issued in 1998 in Hanahan, and there's been a lot of benefit to the community from that TIF, but it's going to expire in a couple of years. That TIF makes the taxes generated within that TIF zone are specific to that municipality or the owner of the TIF. So there's about over $300,000 in revenue annually that would go to the other taxing entities in the county that do not receive that money. About $221,000 would go to the school district on an annual basis, and I think that is scheduled to end in 2018. And so the school district would have additional operating money and additional money to pay down debt when that expires. Building sidewalks, connecting neighborhoods that are connecting the school to existing neighborhoods is not a responsibility of the school district. Road improvements, turn lane, traffic signals outside of the SDOT requirements to service a new school. With the building of the new school, there will be a traffic study. The school district will have to make improvements to the area in regards to traffic. We just don't want to work outside of what's required by that traffic study and don't feel like it's a school district obligation. Also, attendance lines. All of our schools in Berkeley County are crowded. We need to make sure that we can monitor that, and we want the residents in Hanahan to have the school that they voted for, but the zoning is not linked to an attendance line. Just the date of December the 10th, 2013, we went into that meeting, just to remind the board, and the staff report, which included the traffic study, recommended that the zoning should be approved with 4 conditions, which we could have resolved had that zoning been approved. But there were, I'm not taking aim at anybody for the zoning. We're moving past that. But there was a large investment during the zoning process to get this bowling track ready to build that school, to get it open by 2013. So you can understand by looking at this slide why there was such disappointment from the school district that we could not move forward in the zoning of that property. There was significant investment in the design and the due diligence trying to meet staff requirements. I think my battery's going there, dead there, but meet staff requirements. And if you can't see the number at the bottom, that's $235,000 that we were put into this school ready to build. Now, some of those items can be reused if we use a similar design, but the traffic studies, the environmental studies, going through the zoning process was an expensive venture. So I just want the public to understand that it wasn't personal. We just invested in this, a lot in this property, trying to meet the August 2015 opening for the citizens of Hanahan that voted for this project. Okay, after the zoning was denied, we were the city offered to us Williams Lane option 2. And this is option 1 on the bottom, and this is just across the street. It's 21 acres. You can see that it's a little jagged, but it's a large piece of property. We spent some money on this property, if you can see on the previous slide. I guess I should subtract a little bit of money on the previous slide because some of it went to the due diligence on this project. The frontage there was closer, but still didn't meet the requirement. We, though, wanted, looked at this piece of property, but if you look at the plat, again, what's wrong with my dot?
Your finger dot.
All right. Thank you for telling me. I'll make relief. All right. You see that property? We have the wetland buffer that goes through, and this one actually cuts through the center of the property. So this is 21 acres. It has 4 acres of wetland buffer. So that takes it down to 17, and there's 4 acres that's isolated. So it's not 21 necessarily usable acres of property. However, we wanted to see if there's ways that we could make this property work. So we sent letters to residents of adjacent property. And I'll get my finger out the way. There is the property. So you can see there's some adjacent property that might make this more usable. There's North Rhett. There's one way in right there. And it would be nice to have a second way out, at least out to North Rhett. So to do that, we inquired about this piece of property. We inquired about all these pieces of property. Maybe if we could get this one and this one to have a second entrance, and then, if we could knock that corner off, we could really open up some space for bus loops and stacking. But we weren't able to successfully obtain any of these properties. And Mr. Bullwinkle talked about the long process, even if we did have someone willing to move that property. So definitely a possibility if we can figure out some of these obstacles, and if someone wants to try to package that together, we will consider all options. One other piece of property that we learned about just a couple of weeks ago, we knew about it before but had some serious conversations about the Copeland property. Just to get you acclimated, Bilo is right here. This is something square right here, shopping center. This is the entrance to Tanner Hall, North Rhett. But this property right here appears to be available, and we'll see if the developer puts in an RFP for consideration of this property. I think all packaged together, it's 16, 17 acres, but there's a possible entrance. And then you have plenty of space on the road there. So that, we'll see what kind of package they put together, if any, going forward. if all else fails, and this is not anything that we're promoting, but eventually we're going to have to do something, and this is definitely a last option. If we're not able to, if we go through everything and not able to find a suitable building site, something that we've talked about, we're expanding the existing schools, and this would be something that bond council would have to approve, and we'd have to show that we've exhausted every opportunity to acquire property to build a new school. Add in the 4th and 5th grade wing at Hanahan Elementary, that would take that population from over 1,000 to 1,400. You guys that live there know the traffic concerns there. Adding 4th and 5th grade wing to Goose Creek Primary, they have 1,100, so it'd take that population to 1,400. And adding this kindergarten through 2nd grade at Sedgefield, and basically just expanding the facilities where we have the crowded here. So not a desired option, but just have it on the back burner just as an emergency recourse if something is not able to work. But I feel confident that we're going to, with this request for a proposal, that we're going to find a piece of property that will work. As I close, I'd like just to take a moment, and I'm asking Mr. Thomas to join me. We've had lots of citizen comments over the last couple of weeks in regards to our legal fees. And yes, legal fees are expensive, but I would like to point out just a couple of items I'm not sure that the public is aware about. The first item, we don't have any district in-house counsel. So a district our size could expect to budget over $250,000, maybe $300,000 if they were to have an in-house attorney and support for that attorney, which we outsource all of our legal issues. Even if we had an in-house attorney, they would deal with some personnel issues, some student issues, but we'd still have to go outside of our legal counsel for some specialty issues. And one of those specialty issues is bond counsel for the restructuring of our debt. And I would like and a large number there, but I'd like for Mr. Thomas to speak of that just for a moment.
Thank you. As you have heard some comments in the past about the lot of money that we've spent on legal fees, and I've addressed it, I think, at one board meeting. That does seem to be a lot of money, but we are required to have bond counsel for any bond issue that we issue. It's not a negotiated item. We have to have that. And within that restructuring or refunding of debt, within an 11-month period of time, we refunded 3 bond issues with saving over $28 million in principal and interest savings. So I think the school district has shown that we're proactive in addressing rates and going to the market at the right time. So just kind of wanted to talk on those points. This is kind of like refinancing your house or buying a house. It's kind of done after the sale is done, and it's gone through an escrow account, and it's paid by the cost of issuance fund. So wanted to kind of address that. And again, it's not a negotiated thing that we have to, we cannot not have a bond attorney. So, and then again, one of the things I'm most proud about is the restructuring of the 2003 safe bonds. We were able to take almost $22 million off the books with principal and interest. So that was pretty huge. We're getting ready to go to the market for the 2006 and do the same thing. Won't be as much, but it'll be significant. So I look forward to bringing that to when that happens. So that.
Thank you. And I just want to emphasize what Mr. Thomas said. $670,000. It does not come out of the operating budget. It was absorbed in the closing costs, so to speak. Just like if you close on your real estate property. And the last item there, we've acquired over 160 acres of land in the last few months, and over 40 of those acres were gifted, but there's a lot of work that has to go into the title transfers and the contracts on to protect the best interests of the school district. And many of you are aware we've had some real estate dealings in the past from former boards that have handcuffed this board in regards to things that affect the operation of schools. So with that, I'd just like to say in closing for the second time, we have an aggressive schedule with this RFP. And our goal now is to get that school, we're going to do everything in our possibility to get it open in August of 2016. It takes about 14 months to build a school once we're ready to construct. But I'm confident that we're going to be able to work with those involved to get a piece of property that will work for the citizens of Hanahan and Goose Creek area. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions or comments.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. We'll start with Mr. Cooper, District 1.
Couple of questions.
District 2, I apologize.
On Williams Lane, number 1, just for a point of clarification, because I thought it was my understanding also that DOT told us in addition to having not enough space for the access, the XL, decel lanes, that also Williams Lane itself was 2 feet too narrow for what they require for a residential street that accesses a school. Is that correct?
Yes, DOT has indicated to us, but go back one, this is Williams Lane 2, and this is 1. This is Foster Creek Road. They had indicated that we would have to reconstruct this road to the school site because it wouldn't accommodate the buses, traffic, and it was too narrow, not deep enough. And still there, you can see how much further it is to get an out, even if we were granted some type of easement there. So.
Right, and I'm sure as those of us on the board, and even Mr. Hardesty can confirm that getting in the road business, we learned that at Cane Bay High School. That's not a real good situation to be in.
$3 million lesson.
Yeah.
Mr. Cooper, just if I could ask a question, I'm going to go right back to you, but you've put a thought in my mind. Do you have an estimate as to how much that road construction would have cost us or may cost us? And then where would that money come from?
It would have to come out of the project of the school. But,
so it would reduce the amount to build the school?
It would, right, and we're estimated from here to here approximately $700,000.
Okay, how about to North Rhett?
Well, it's a little further, so you could probably double that.
Or more.
1.5.
Yeah, and those are just estimates.
All right. Mr. Cooper, I apologize. The microphone's still yours, sir.
My other question or comment was, is I would hope that as we continue to hear about legal fees and, there's a lot of school board seats up in campaigns, that we would keep what the facts are around those legal fees in perspective, because I think the taxpayers, 670 is a lot of money, but to get $22 million as a payback on that, again, our hats off
total.
to
28.
28 total.
28
Three
million.
to,
My hats off. That's you can't get a return like that every day, and I'd spend $1 million on those fees, and you can put it in the paper all you want. So keep doing it. It's great stuff.
I'm gonna miss you. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Lee?
How long is the RFP open, and what kind of response have we gotten so far?
well, it has to stay closed until the opening date. My notes, I think,
September.
yes.
It's mid-September.
Let me grab that stack of papers just so.
Go ahead, buddy, I don't see it.
Might be under my finger. I don't know, I guess I misplaced them between here and there. I know that we would like to make a decision to the board by October the 14th. And I think the closing date, Crystal, can you help me?
September 18th sound correct?
I want to say September the 25th, and September the 18th was the day that we would respond to questions.
I think that's correct.
Okay.
I have some papers clipped together with that RFP. If somebody sees it up there. They're due September the 18th.
And that's already on the website, I've been told.
Right.
Okay, good.
Right, so that's a quick turnaround time. We reserve the right to extend that if we need additional time, but again, as we talked the other day at the citizens meetings, I think the majority of the room was in favor of trying to meet that August 2016 start date.
I would agree. I would agree. All right, Ms. Lee, any other questions or comments? All right. Ms. Moore, Mr. Hayes? All right, just one question, Dr. Thompson. Could we go to the legal fees page? Leave us the last slide. Mr. Thomas, I want to make sure I understand your explanation. On the second line item, the $670,000 amount resulted in $28 million worth of bonds being taken off the books.
Interest savings and principal taken off.
So $28 million. So in your mind, as a nationally recognized director of finance, was that a good idea?
I'd do it every day if I could.
Keep doing it. And for those who are spreading the misinformation, we'll take the heat. You keep doing it. I do ask you to do one thing. Put an explanation on the website for those who actually read in an attempt to understand the topic so that they will have the information they need to formulate an opinion. You follow what I'm saying? We have a responsibility to make sure that we're educating the public on these issues. And I want to make sure that we're doing that. And Mr. Thomas, we're very lucky to have you, sir. Very lucky to have you. Any other questions or comments? Very thorough, Dr. Thompson. Thank you. Do you have any more with your superintendent's report, or may I begin the executive session? Thank you, sir. All right, we'll now move to agenda item number 10. Tonight's executive session will serve the purpose of the board hearing attendance appeals, personnel considerations, contractual matters, and legal briefing. Tonight we have 6 attendance appeals. So with that said, do I have a motion and a second to move into executive session? Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Thank you, Ms. Moore. We now stand in executive session.